why does this have to happen tonight? This was supposed to be a happy day and a happy time, and now my dog is dying. And then her heart rate started to drop.
A little bit of your heart to me. Just come give me all your love. I want you to know we can make it together. Let the wind blow. All we need is each other. Come take my hand, you're all that I have. Now I won't let you go, 'cause I found all the answers in you. Ooh, 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 ooh.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today I'm going to be telling the story of the birth of my second daughter, Ashlyn, who I have here. Say hi! It was a scheduled induction during COVID-19, so things were a little bit different than what they usually would have been. I wanted to go ahead and film this video while everything was still somewhat fresh in my mind and just talk about things that weren't talked about or weren't talked about in as much detail as what was in my labor and delivery vlog, which if you haven't seen that yet, I highly recommend you go check it out. It's one of my favorite videos on my channel so far. I mean, I'm probably a little biased though. I actually sat and filmed this video yesterday and sat down to edit it, and I had almost an hour and a half of footage, and once I sat there for over an hour editing it, I'd only managed to get it down to about 50 minutes, and that was way too long. So now I'm having to refilm it and everything, but hopefully I can keep it a little bit shorter this time. So yesterday I did end up going back and rewatching my labor and delivery vlog and just like taking notes on things that I didn't quite remember or that weren't really mentioned in my original birth like list. Because during labor I had a notes list on my phone where like I would just timestamp when things happened, but I didn't go into detail, and some stuff was missing. So I watched the video again and just really wrote down everything that I wanted to talk about so that I could stay on track better. Also, hi if you're new here, I'm Sandra and I am a 20-year-old mom of 2 girls. I have a toddler named London, she will be 2 in August, and then of course I have Ashlyn here who is coming up on 3 weeks old. Okay, so my induction was scheduled for June 5th, it was a Friday, at 8 a.m. I was 39 weeks pregnant on that day. This was an elective induction. At my 37-week appointment, I had talked to my doctor about scheduling an induction because if you don't already know, all of our family lives 9 hours away in South Carolina and we are in Ohio. So if I had gone into labor spontaneously, we wouldn't have had anyone to watch London, and it would have been really unlikely for someone to be able to make it here all the way from South Carolina to take over with her so that Christopher could be at the hospital with me. And I had a lot of anxiety going up to the day, and up until like getting close to my due date I had a lot of anxiety because I didn't know what we would do. I didn't want to go to the hospital by myself. I didn't want him to miss the birth. And honestly, I wished I could have just given birth at home, but we weren't able to get access to a midwife really, so it wasn't really an option for us to give birth at home unless we did it by ourselves, which we weren't totally comfortable with, obviously, and that's very controversial. So once my doctor did indeed schedule an induction for me, we talked to Christopher's grandmother about it, and if you don't know, Christopher is my husband. He's the father of both girls. His grandma then made arrangements to come up to Ohio to stay with us so that she could watch London while we were at the hospital. Originally, our plan actually was to have London go to the hospital with us, but then COVID happened and that was no longer an option. Once we made the plans for his grandma to come up here to stay with us, I knew I just needed to make it until she arrived, which thankfully I did. She arrived to Ohio a few days before my induction date was scheduled, where she stayed with her sister about an hour away until the night before induction. That's when she came up to stay with us. I did not ever end up going into labor spontaneously. I made it all the way to my induction date like normal. With that little bit of backstory, let's get into the day before my scheduled induction. His grandmother arrived to our house late Thursday afternoon, and we then went and had Olive Garden together. And then we came back home and we kind of just hung out. We watched a movie or two and talked. We did that until about 11 p.m. And that's when we started to get ready to go to bed. Before bed, we always let our dogs out to use the bathroom one last time. If you don't know, we do have 3 dogs. Nyx, Rhea, and Cleo. Nyx is a dachshund, Rhea is a German Shepherd mix, and Cleo is our newest. She's a puppy and she is a pit mix. So we let the dogs out, we got London her cup of milk before bed, and then we let the dogs back in so we could head back to the room. But Nyx wasn't out there. Now Nyx tends to get out of the fence and wander around sometimes, but she always comes back, so we weren't really worried. Some nights she'll get out of the fence and then we'll let the other two dogs in and close the blinds, and within 5 minutes you'll hear her jumping on the door ready to come in. We have fixed our fence multiple times, but Nyx is so small she can fit through like anything, and they just keep making new holes. In my labor and delivery vlog, I mentioned that we had something going on with Nyx the night before, but I didn't get into it, but I'm going to get into that now. After 5 or 10 minutes, she still hadn't come back and we were just trying to go to bed. Me and Christopher alternated going out and calling her multiple times to try and get her to come. Finally, around 12:30 in the morning, I went one more time to check and went to the front door and opened it, and she was just sitting there chilling on the porch waiting. So I let her in and I thought, good, we can finally go to sleep because we have an early morning and a long day tomorrow. She went under the bed and I got into the bed. As Christopher and I were laying in bed, we kept hearing her knock around under our bed and like hit the frame, and we didn't understand why she was doing this. After around 10 minutes of her doing that, Christopher got out of bed and made her get into the bed. So she climbed up and she got up on my pillow behind my head and laid down, and we thought we were good to go. It was time to go to sleep now. But we just kept hearing weird sounds coming from her, and honestly I thought she was just being weird making noises because dogs tend to do that sometimes. After her continuing to make these noises, I sat up to look at her, and in the dark all I could see was it kind of looked like she had something around her mouth. So I jumped up and had Christopher turn the light on, and when I looked at her, we just knew something was wrong. Looking at her, she definitely had foam around her mouth, and usually your first thought with that is, oh my god, rabies. But she also had a huge lump in her throat. It was swollen like to the size of a golf ball, or maybe even bigger. At this point, I started to really freak out because she looked like she was in a lot of pain. She was having a lot of trouble breathing, and I had no idea what was going on. So we took her to the bathroom, and at first we thought she just swallowed something that she shouldn't have. We were thinking maybe like a bird or a mouse or something. And we figured, okay, maybe it's just lodged in her throat, so we need to get her to throw it up. So I started to gag her to try and get her to puke up whatever it was that we thought was stuck in her throat. At this point, London had woken up and followed us into the bathroom, and it was the middle of the night. It was close to 1 in the morning, and she was super cranky and fussy and just was not helping the stressful situation out. And we were also under a lot of stress because we were trying to do all of this while staying quiet because his grandmother was sleeping downstairs and we did not want to disturb her. I managed to get Nyx to throw up a little bit, but it was just some mucus and a little bit of grass. For a second I was like, okay, maybe she just ate some grass and it's like balled up in there, so let's continue to try and get her to puke the rest up. After a little bit longer of doing that, we then gave up on that being the case and started to wonder what else could have possibly happened. Christopher was saying maybe something bit her or someone hit her or there was some sort of trauma that caused it to swell up like that. I was honestly hoping she had just eaten something because getting her to puke it up just seemed like an easier fix than whatever else could have happened, but that obviously wasn't the case. We had no idea what to do because it's the middle of the night. We have a lot going on the next day, and we don't know of any emergency vets open around us. She then began to start acting really lethargic. She was having a lot of trouble breathing and was wheezing really bad, and we both thought she was going to die. We ended up just laying on the bathroom floor with her and trying to comfort her and just hoped that she would peacefully pass and not be in pain anymore, as much as that hurt to think about. My dog dying, but we didn't want her to suffer anymore. I was freaking out, crying my eyes out about losing my dog. We've had this dog for almost 3 years. She's always been my little buddy. She's always with me. I felt really guilty because I was thinking, why does this have to happen tonight? This was supposed to be a happy day and a happy time, and now my dog is dying. It was sometime after 4 in the morning when Christopher looked at me and said, look, you need to go to bed. You need to get some rest. You have to give birth tomorrow. You don't need to be stressed out. You don't need to be worrying about this kind of thing right now. We need to go to bed. So he said, let's just go to bed and we'll check on her in the morning. At first I really fought that because I was just feeling like a horrible person. I was thinking, my dog is laying here possibly dying. How am I supposed to just go to bed? But he was kind of right. So on that note, we went to bed. I still couldn't sleep because my mind was racing so much and my body was in a lot of pain from me sitting and laying and moving around the bathroom floor for hours. I was so sore, everything hurt, I could barely move, I couldn't like roll over and get comfortable, and it just hurt so bad. I kept waking up like every 30 minutes and I had to be up before 7 in the morning. That gave me about two and a half hours to get some sleep in, and what little bit of sleep I did get was so broken up because I kept waking up, and I probably only got like an hour and a half total that whole time. Morning finally came and Nick seemed a little bit better and was acting fine. She was just a little swollen. And while we were at the hospital later in the day, his grandma was actually updating us and she was letting us know Nix was eating and drinking fine, and it seemed like the swelling was going down, so we felt a lot better about that situation because it seemed like she was recovering fine, which she did. She is alive and well, and her neck actually completely went back to normal. So that is the situation on what happened with Nix that night. It was horrible in the moment and so super stressful, but I'm just thankful that in the end she was okay and she's still alive. So that morning I got up and began getting ready, made sure that everything was packed that we needed. We said goodbye to London and then we headed to the hospital. We got there at 8 a.m., checked in, went to my room, changed into the gown, and then we were just waiting for things to get started. At around 9 a.m. they came in, they did an ultrasound to make sure she was head down. They checked me and I was 3 centimeters dilated, 70% of face, and a -3 station, which I had actually been at 3 centimeters since at least 37 weeks. They put my IV in, and at first they started me on just fluids, swabbed my nose for COVID, and gave me some paperwork to fill out. Not long after that, they started the penicillin drip because I was group B positive, which just meant that I had to have bags of antibiotics in my IV during labor just to make sure that nothing got passed on to the baby. At around 10:30, the nurse finally started the Pitocin. I started out on a level 2 out of 20, and then at around 11:30, they kicked it up to a 6. Sometime in between then, I'm pretty sure it had gone to a 4, but I did not say that, so I don't know exactly. My COVID test had come back negative, and at this point there wasn't really much to do but just wait. I was doing some word searches and we were just hanging out and relaxing pretty much. Sometime after 12 p.m. I was on a level 8 drip and contractions had picked up some. They were probably like a 6 out of 10 on a pain scale, and I was waiting for my nurse to find out if they wanted to check my dilation again and to see if my doctor wanted them to break my water. At 1:15 they checked me and I was still at a 3, but they did break my water, and we all thought things would start to pick up at this point. And then her heart rate started to drop. So they made me switch to laying on my side instead of sitting up. And for some reason, my contractions felt so much worse whenever I was laying down in that position. I began to start thinking about getting the epidural, but I wanted to see how much progress I had made. When the contractions started to get really worse, the things that I did to get through them was 1, breathe, and 2, I would kind of bear down as if I was pushing, which for some reason it actually helped a lot. I'm not sure if you should do that, but it made it a little better. And honestly, I also hoped that me doing that would kind of speed things along and get her to move down and stuff. At 2 p.m. I ended up asking for the epidural because my nurse came in. She saw that I was in a lot of pain and she asked me, she was like, "How are you feeling? Do you think you're gonna want the epidural soon?" Because the anesthesiologist is actually about to go into a C-section. In my head I was thinking, all right, I'm okay for now, but if he's going, he or she, I don't know, if the anesthesiologist is going into surgery, I don't know how long they're going to be gone, and then I'm going to be stuck waiting until they're done. And you also have to take into account the fact that the epidural has to have time to even start working, so I was kind of nervous that I would be stuck in a lot of pain for a long time because I decided to wait on the epidural, so I told her that I wanted to go ahead and get it. They finished putting my epidural in around 3 p.m. and honestly, in my experience, the anticipation of it is so much worse than the actual epidural. Basically, they just give you a shot of numbing medicine in your back, which kind of burns a little bit, but it's nothing too bad. And then they start to do the actual placement, which feels like pressure and like a cranking sensation against your spine, but it's not painful in my opinion. Slightly uncomfortable, but not really. The worst part for me about the epidural is the anticipation and having to stay curled up in one position, not moving, while you're having contractions every 2-3 minutes, maybe less, maybe more, depends on you. But that is what is the hardest part in my experience. I had been laying on my right side in the bed, but then I started to get a lot of sharp pains in my left side, which were super painful. And usually your epidural will take more to the side that you're on. And so when I told my nurse that I was having a lot of pain in my left side, she said, yeah, we should probably flip you so that the epidural can disperse into that side as well and you can be completely numb. I was still in a little bit of pain and wanted to wait until I was completely numb on my left side because I did want to try out the peanut ball, which if you don't know, it's basically literally what it sounds like. It's a big ball in the shape of a peanut. Because I had heard that they're really good for helping you dilate faster and get baby into the right position. And my nurse agreed that it was a good idea. So she got me the peanut ball, and you're gonna have to ignore London out there playing. But she got the peanut ball and I laid with it in between my legs for a little bit. Now this whole labor, I had tried to take a nap because I knew that I needed rest. I got next to no sleep that whole night. I'm about to have a newborn who's gonna keep me up in the hospital a lot of the time as well. So who knows when I'm gonna be able to get some real sleep in. I need my energy to push. Like, I kept telling myself, you need to take a nap, you need to take a nap. But I just never could. I was just too excited the whole time, and you know, there's a lot going on, it's uncomfortable, and you're being checked on all the time. So I never ended up getting any sleep that day. I was checked again around 3:15 and had only made it to 4 centimeters, which I was starting to feel really discouraged. I had hoped that this labor would go a lot faster, and we all thought that because my water was broken that things would start speeding along, but it was still going rather slow. And me and Christopher kind of needed her to come before bedtime because he was gonna have to go home to help with London. And honestly, with how my body felt, I just thought I would have progressed more. After having to switch sides a couple times and her heart rate still was dropping during my contractions, they came back in and had me sit up in the bed so I could no longer sit with my peanut ball because I had to sit up. And they gave me some medicine through my IV because apparently my blood pressure had been pretty low. And then at 4:15 they checked me and I was maybe a 4.5. So still not very much progress. And they also had turned my Pitocin back down to a 2 so that they could give Ashlyn a break because she was getting stressed out during my contractions. With everything going on with the heart rate, the doctors had began talking about doing some sort of fluid transfer, which basically it's a bag of fluids that is attached to like an IV line that they just stick up there in your vagina, and they use it to refill your uterus with fluids to kind of mimic the amniotic fluid. And they wanted to do this because they were thinking that what was causing Ashlyn to be stressed out was that because my water had been broken and there was not much room anymore, that my contractions were most likely compressing her cord. Because during the ultrasound that morning, the doctor did not check where my placenta was or where the cord was, so we didn't know what exactly was going on, but they thought that that was the most reasonable explanation. I told them that I was fine with that because I was willing to try almost anything to avoid a C-section because those terrify me. Every time her heart rate would drop, I was so worried that they were just gonna come rushing in and be like, okay, you have to go to an emergency C-section now. And I don't know what I would have done. And at this point, they had put in internal monitors to monitor my contractions as well as her heart rate. My monitor, I think, just kind of like goes up there and sits, but hers actually screws into the top of her head, which she still has a little tiny scab from that. It doesn't hurt them. It's just a way for them to be able to monitor more closely because the ones that go outside on the stomach, they lose the heartbeat really easily, like with any movement, and it's not very consistent. And the external monitor also wasn't really like monitoring my contractions right. The whole time I was in labor, I was looking at the monitor thinking that that contraction does not look like what I feel. But once they switched the internal one, they actually seem to match a lot better. So those external monitors aren't very accurate sometimes. Around 5:15 p.m. Christopher left to go pick up dinner for London, his grandma, and himself. I was checked around 5:30 and was a 5.5/6. So I got a little somewhere. And they made me go back down to laying on my side. I asked about the transfer because I actually hadn't heard about it since they like brought it up to me, and she said, well, her heart rate kind of fixed and the doctor decided to not do it. So I was like, okay, her heart rate fixed, that's good, I guess. And then like 10 minutes later, she came back in and was like, it dropped again, so we're gonna do it. And they started bringing everything in, the cart and the bags, and they started to scan it in the system, but it wasn't scanning up right or something, so they were like, well, let's just double check. And then her heart rate fixed again, so they were like, oh, never mind. And then they left, but they left the stuff in the room, I believe. And then like another 10 minutes later, they come back in. Oh, it dropped again, we're gonna do it. And they actually did it at the time. A little after 6, they checked me and I had jumped to a 7. So in like 30 minutes, I had gone from a 5.5, maybe 6 to a 7. So I was thinking maybe things were finally picking up, and I got a little nervous thinking that Christopher wouldn't make it back in time. So I had texted him and told him, I'm 7 centimeters dilated. I think you should try and get back here as soon as you can. Because he was still at Wendy's at this point. He hadn't even picked the food up yet because it was taking a long time, and there was randomly a really bad storm and it was like flooded and raining really bad. And he had actually been planning to pick up some food, go home, eat at the house with them, pick up some things for me and get a sweatshirt because he was apparently cold, which I didn't expect because that entire time I was burning up in that hospital room. He got back about 6:30, so he did make it back in time. My epidural seemed to not be working now. I could feel everything in my stomach and it was pretty constant, so I was starting to think that maybe it was about time. My nurse called the anesthesiologist team to come up because of my epidural not working, and they gave me like an extra shot of medicine. I can't remember the term that they use whenever they do it, but they kind of gave me like an extra shot to try and get it to work real quick before I was having to push my baby out. And then a male doctor came in. He might have been a nurse or a doctor or a resident, I'm not 100% sure. And he was talking to me and he was saying that it was a possibility that I was in so much more pain because of the fluid transfer switching things up. And he also agreed that I might be, what he said was complete, meaning ready to push, and that's why the pain was so constant and so intense. So he checked my cervix and I was in fact 10 centimeters dilated and I was completely ready to push, but my doctor was not there. I was glad things finally picked up after it taking 9.5 hours for me to get from a 3 to 6. And then all of a sudden I jumped from 7 to 10 within like 30 minutes. It was a little crazy. But at the same time, I felt like it was just our luck. Christopher had been there all morning and things were going really slow. And then the minute that he leaves to go run an errand, my body's just like, kick it into drive now. We're gonna speed things up and hopefully he makes it back in time. We don't know. So I was just laying in bed, 10 centimeters dilated, waiting on my doctor. They did tell me that they had plenty of residents and doctors on hand if I absolutely had to push and could not wait, but he said I probably wanted my actual doctor there, which I kind of agreed to. But I still felt fine. I didn't think that I had to push and I was okay with waiting for my doctors at this point, so I said I would just wait. I was in a good bit of pain. It was at least an 8 out of 10. I felt numb in my vagina area, but I felt everything in my stomach. And I was able to move my legs really easily, which is not typical with an epidural. Because that is what I was doing to get through the pain. I was gripping the rails, I was breathing, and I was sitting there rubbing my legs back and forth, like rubbing my feet against the bed. And that seemed to like help me like concentrate and get through the contractions and the pain, which the contractions were pretty constant, like I said. And my nurse always commented on how quiet I was during the whole thing, and even my doctor agreed. But that's just how I am. I'm really timid and I just would feel super awkward if I was like in there screaming or something. And honestly, I was managing fine. I didn't really feel the need to be loud. At one point while waiting on the doctor, I said out loud that I wished I could sit up because I was like just stuck laying flat and I was kind of like wishing I could sit up. So I said that and my nurse was like, yeah, no, there's not gonna be any spitting the baby out before the doctor gets here, because apparently like if I had sat up it would have kind of been like a bad idea. The doctor was close. They said she was gonna be there in a few minutes, so they started getting things ready. They lifted the bed up, turned the lights on, had my legs in the stirrups, removed the bottom and whatever else. And then my doctor finally comes in and it was time to go. Literally, she just walks right in, puts her gloves on, comes to the bed, and it's like, all right, let's push this baby out. I pushed for 1 contraction. It was 3 little pushes, probably would have been less, but for some reason I couldn't concentrate on doing like a full legit push. I kept like not holding my breath right and like breaking out of the push too soon and stuff like that. I don't really understand why that happened, but it probably could have been faster if I had actually pushed correctly. But it was maybe a minute of pushing and no tearing, thank Lord. I honestly expected to tear because I tore with London, and I the whole pregnancy thought that Ashlyn was gonna be a bigger baby. I thought she was gonna be at least 7 pounds, maybe closer to 8. So I thought for sure that I was gonna tear. But she came out so easily. And I think part of that has to do with how long I was sitting there just waiting for the doctor while 10 centimeters dilated, because I sat there for like almost 40 minutes before I started to push, knowing that I was a 10, and who knows when I had actually become a 10 before they checked me. So I sat at a 10 for at least 40 minutes. So Ashlyn was born at 7:10 p.m. after 9 hours of labor. Counting from when the time they started Pitocin to the time she was born, it was about 9 hours. On June 5th, 2020, she weighed 6 pounds, 12 ounces, and was 18.5 inches long. And like I said, I did not tear while pushing her out, but this might be a little weird TMI, but this is a birth story, so what can you expect? Weeks before, at one of my appointments, I talked to my doctor and I was like, look, I've got this mole in my vagina area, and I've had it my whole life, but a couple weeks ago I was shaving down there and I accidentally nicked it, and like it bled, and it's only halfway hanging on at this point, and shaving down there is really hard now because I almost always nick it again and then it ends up bleeding and blah blah blah. So I'm like, since you're gonna be down there anyways, can you just take it off, because I'm sick of dealing with it. He was like, yeah, that's no problem, we can do that for sure. And before she had arrived, while they were getting me ready, I kind of looked at them and I was like, hey, I asked my doctor about this, so like if you could just remind her, that'd be great, because I really want this thing gone. So after Ashlyn was born and, you know, Christopher cut the cord, they delivered the placenta. They delivered the placenta and just were checking out things to make sure everything was good while Ashlyn was on my chest doing like the golden hour thing, which at this hospital was actually 2 hours. They, you know, scraped it off, and they did end up stitching where the mole was. They put 2 little stitches in there, so technically I got stitches, but not because of delivery. And that is my labor and delivery story. Overall, it was a really positive experience. Everything was pretty chill and easy aside from our stressful night with the dog and then dealing with Ashlyn's heart rate dipping during my contractions. But in the end, she is here and she is healthy and I'm good. My nurse was so amazing during the whole thing. She was so kind and so sweet, and she made us feel really relaxed and supported throughout the whole thing. She always kept us informed really well and explained everything that was going on to us. She answered all of our questions, and we had a good time joking with each other and telling stories and hanging out whenever she was in the room with us. And she was honestly just the best. So much better than my experience with London, because I had some pretty like judgy nurses whenever I was in the hospital of London. But yeah, I'm very happy with the birth experience that I had, and part of me can't wait to do it again one day. Alright, you guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and a comment below. Tell me about your birth story. If you've given birth before, I would love to read them. Subscribe to the channel before you go if you have not already, so you can keep up with us and our little family. Make sure to check out the labor and delivery vlog if you have not already. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Although my scars start to heal when I'm with you, and I can't explain how I feel when I'm with you. Just give a little bit of your heart, give a little bit of your heart to me.